right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. I hope everybody enjoyed the summer recess. Thrilled to be back for this special meeting. I'll call the meeting to order for the afternoon of August 6th. Tony, would you please call the roll?
Jimenez.
Present.
Torres.
Present.
Cohen. Here. Ortiz.
Present.
Davis.
Here.
Dwan.
Here.
Candelas.
Here.
Foley. Batra.
Present.
Kamei.
Here.
Mahan.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Now, if you're able, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you all. So we are easing back into things with a single item special meeting here. We're here to discuss the potential parcel tax ballot measure. Staff has gone out, done additional research, which they will share with us. I want to thank my colleagues for supporting this surveying and understanding where our community is on this important issue. We obviously all are big supporters of our parks and want to always explore ways of getting more support to them. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to, I believe, Sarah Sarate to kick things off. Oh, I'm sorry. Did we have a closed session report out? I didn't have that on my list here. I apologize, Sarah. Nora, do you want to give us the closed session report?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. We did have a closed session this morning, and it was to follow up on a memo from June 6th of this year. There was direction in that memo for the city manager and the city attorney to draft ballot language and return to the council today for consideration of placing on the November 5th, 2024 ballot a measure amending the city charter to change the contracting for legal services by the retirement boards and appointing authority for the chief executive officer of the Office of Retirement Services. Included in that memo was a discussion of a potential agreement with the retirement boards, and the report out of closed session is that an agreement has been reached with the retirement boards, and the council will not be bringing forward or considering today, and the city attorney's office or the city manager's office and my office are not bringing forward a ballot measure, but there is a settlement agreement with the boards covering a variety of issues on the Office of Retirement Services, and that agreement will be publicly available. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Nora. Apologies for missing that. Thank you, Councilmember Davis. And then also, as I come back to staff as we get into item 3.1, also just note for context, we had some initial public survey data that indicated the community might be open to additional support for parks, and then we decided over the summer to go out and do additional research to make sure the council's fully informed. So again, thanks to colleagues for supporting that approach, which I know is the staff rec, and now I'll turn it over to Sarah and the team to tell us where we are.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, and members of the public. My name is Sarah Sarate. I'm the director of the City Manager's Office of Administration, Policy, and Intergovernmental Relations. I'll be presenting today with Peter Hamilton from the City Manager's Office, but I'm also joined by other colleagues, including Neil Rufino and Avi Yotam from the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood Services Department, and Rosa Sangtatari from the City Attorney's Office. We're also joined by Dave Metz from our polling firm, and we're here to provide you an update on recent polling results, exploring a potential ballot measure providing additional revenue for parks. As you may recall, back in March, the administration received direction related to potential ballot measures for November 2024. We presented the results of the first round of polling on June 18th, and we were further directed to do additional polling on a parcel tax by refining the tax rate and ballot language with information learned in the May survey, as well as better understanding the sensitivity to an expected crowded ballot. For a parcel tax to be successful, it would require meeting a 2/3 voter threshold, or or just over 66%. You may recall that back in June, there was the possibility of Assembly Constitutional Amendment 1, known as ACA 1, being placed on the November ballot, which proposed to reduce the threshold required for passage of certain bonds and special taxes from 2/3 to 55%, provided it met certain criteria. AC1 was in fact narrowed later in June by ACA 10 to only impact certain bond measures. This item will now appear on the November ballot as Proposition 5. To meet City Council direction, Peter and I worked with 2 consultants in June and in July to refine the tax rate and develop a second survey. The survey was administered in July to a random sample of 1,200 San Jose potential voters who are likely to participate in the November 2024 election. Our polling consultant utilized mixed methods to recruit respondents and collected data over the phone and online. The split sample poll was administered in multiple languages and assigned respondents to one of 3 potential measures with varied tax rates but the same services. Subsample C tested a $35 flat rate on single-family parcels, while sample D tested a half-cent per square foot on single-family parcels. These 2 rates result in approximately the same amount of revenue, but we were testing here if people responded differently to the rate language. Sample E again tested the 1 cent square foot on single-family parcels to understand if any price sensitivity existed. While only the single-family rates would appear on the ballot language, other property types would be taxed at varying rates, the specifics of which are found in the ordinance that would be approved by the ballot measure. The overall margin of error for the survey was plus or minus 2.8%, whereas the smaller subsamples had a margin of error of 4.9%. Before I hand it off to Peter to review the results of the ballot language, I want to highlight an important question read to respondents prior to being given any ballot measure language. To determine the perception of need for parks funding, people were asked if they generally believed San Jose had a need for additional funding of its parks. Importantly, this perception of need itself did not hit the 2/3 threshold, perhaps foreshadowing some of the results later in the survey. And with that, I'll hand it off to Peter.
And one of the questions we considered when designing this polling for July was what effect the other measures that would appear on the ballot in November would have on a potential city revenue measure, in particular the large bond measures, the regional housing bond and the statewide school bond. And this had come up in the council discussion back in June, and we had committed to try to come up with a way of measuring that impact when we came back to you. So we came up with 2 ways. You're seeing the first here. So before we read the ballot language to respondents, we read them this preamble, which gives them some context about what they would see on the ballot in November, including those 2 bond measures, and in hopes that that would give us a sense of how that context would affect the results. And then here is the text of all 3 ballot measures that we tested. This is a special tax, so we would only be able to spend the funding for purposes that are listed in the tax. And the language of the bullets that specify those purposes are the same across all 3 ballot measures. Our direction was to focus on park maintenance, and the first bullet achieves that goal. The subsequent 3 bullets on homelessness, litter removal, and gang prevention and recreation programs were determined by programs that polled highly in our polling in May and that would be attractive to voters. And as Sarah mentioned, we varied the rates across all 3 as she described. And when we tested the language, we did 3 tests. We did an initial test where voters read the preamble and then the ballot language. We tested again after reading a positive argument in favor of the measure, and then we tested a final time after reading an opposition argument. And if you look at the opposition argument, those are positive and negative arguments up on the screen. If you look at the opposition argument, this was our second way of getting at the question of a crowded ballot. We split the sample when reading the opposition argument between an argument that did not mention those two bond measures and then an opposition argument that did. So by looking at the different responses after being read that argument between those two samples, we can get a sense of the effect that those measures might have on ours. And with that, these are the results. These are all three samples combined. We see in the initial test there at the top, it came in at 59%, which is several points off from our 2/3 target. And then after being read the pro arguments, support increased slightly by 2 points. And then total support decreased substantially to 52% after being read the opposition argument. So what we can conclude from this is, the initial results are really not where we would need them to be to hit 2/3, and it doesn't appear that there is a whole lot of room for arguments in support to make progress with voters. We saw not a lot of sensitivity to that support argument. So given these results, this is the reason for staff's recommendation to defer consideration of this measure to the 2026 cycle. We'll go into some detail here. This is a demographic breakdown of the results, and we see that, by gender and by age, we see that the most supportive groups are women and people from 18 to 49. And the least supportive group is people from 50 to 64, but in none of these demographic groups do we get over 2/3 support. And this, you recall back when we were looking at the opposition arguments, I mentioned that we split that sample into one that mentioned the bonds and one that didn't. These are the results. So after being read the opposition argument with reference to bonds, a total of 41% of respondents opposed the measure. And after being read the opposition argument without reference to those two bond measures, 34%. So that indicates that the context of those two bonds could have a significant effect, and that's a 7-point swing between the two samples. And this slide shows the consistency of support for the measures throughout the survey. We tested 3 times, the initial, the support, and after the oppose. The blue slice is people who said yes all 3 times. The red slice is people who said no all 3 times. And then the swing is people who either changed from yes to no or who were undecided. And what we can glean from this is that the consistent yes support is below 50%. So it indicates that there would be quite a bit of ground to make up to get to 2/3, which could be challenging for a pro campaign. And this is a comparison of our May results to our July results. So 63 and 65 across our 2 samples in May, and then very similar results across all 3 samples in July at 59% on the initial test. And if you consider that both the samples in both of these surveys have a margin of error of almost 5%, they really aren't that far off, but those few points between the mid-60s and the high 50s are really what makes the difference for a viable measure. So thinking about some reasons why we may have differences, we did test some slightly different language. We amended the language to try to increase the appeal to voters, but we did test different language. The sample composition was slightly different. I think the biggest change we made was the inclusion of the preamble about the other ballot measures. But it's also possible that the overall election climate had an effect on the results. And I'll just end on this slide with reference to that climate. This shows statewide polling from the Public Policy Institute of California, and it shows the percentage of respondents who expect bad times or who expect good times. And as you can see, especially over the past 3 years, those who expect bad times has been quite a bit higher. And even looking at trends within this year, in February of 2024, 62% of Californians were expecting bad times, while in June it was 68%. And similarly, they also asked a question about whether residents would pay higher taxes in exchange for better government services. 48% responded yes in February, while 42% responded yes in June. And in June, they were asked whether this was a good time for a multi-billion-dollar state bond measure. 64% of respondents said it was a bad time. So obviously this is not specific to San Jose. This is statewide polling, but it gives us some perspective on the climate that we'll be, we're operating in when we went out for polling, and we'll be going to the ballot in November. And with that, I'll pass it back to Sarah to talk about next steps.
So as was noted in the recommendation language and the memorandum, staff are recommending that City Council defer placing this tax measure on the ballot for the November election. If Council accepts that recommendation, staff would continue exploring options to fund park maintenance through existing City Council direction received as part of the adopted budget for fiscal year 25-26, related to potential revenue measures for 2026. And this exploration would also include monitoring the outcome of Proposition 5. Staff would also engage key stakeholders over the coming months to better understand top funding priorities for parks. And with that, that concludes the staff presentation. We're happy to answer questions.
Great, thank you for the staff presentation. Obviously not the feedback we were hoping to see, or at least many of us I think were hoping to see, but also very understandable given the concerns I know we're all hearing from our constituents about high cost of living and other pressing issues like unsheltered homelessness, public safety challenges. It makes a lot of sense what we're hearing from voters, and it is good to see that even so we have a solid 50% plus who could see themselves taxing themselves to support our parks. So there's a foundation there to build on, and I appreciate staff's rec and the idea that there's work to do, stakeholder engagement and laying the groundwork for a potential future measure down the road. Just as a process point, Nora, I know we agendized public comment at the end. Is that since it's a study session, or should we take public comment now before council deliberation and then do open forum? Because we are taking action today.
Right.
So I would suggest we do public
Yes,
comment now.
I think you should
Great.
take public
Okay.
comment now.
Just wanted to confirm based on the agenda. Great. So Tony, why don't we go to public comment?
Tim Collins, Bill Kennedy, Larry Ames, and Jean Dresden. And you can come in no particular order. Again, that's Tim Collins, Bill Kennedy, Larry Ames, and Jean Dresden.
Hi, my name's Tim Collins. I live on Morse Street in San Jose. And it came to my knowledge recently, thanks to Bill Kennedy, that just a few blocks from my house, there are a couple of redwood trees that are identified for removal by the city. I'm very grateful to the city for filling in the dip in the road, which is right in front of the street that the trees are on. But I just can't agree, though I'm not a tree specialist, I can't agree with the idea of destroying those 2 trees. The initial plan from the city is to take down 1 tree, and then it's obvious from the language that the city used that they'd take down the other one pretty quickly after that. I've got a huge redwood tree in my backyard. Thank goodness it's not near the sidewalk, but it's looked horrible before and has come back beautifully. Not because I'm a genius at taking care of it, but because that's what redwood trees do. They look horrible from time to time and then come back. I suggest that that's what's going on here, or certainly might be going on here, and that you put a stop to the removal.
Okay. And so I don't know if you're finished there, your time's almost up. This public comment should be on the potential ballot measure, so I would ask for anything not related to this ballot measure that it be held until open forum at the end of the meeting for any topics that aren't on today's agenda.
Sure.
Thank you, though. Appreciate that. Okay. Any other speakers on item 3.1? This is the potential parcel tax ballot measure. Larry?
So hello, I'm Larry Ames, longtime park supporter. I'm glad the polling shows that the public supports our parks and are aware of the need to fund repairs. And I'm glad that the city is working on a solution now. I've been involved with a number of successful park funding campaigns over the years. They all took time. Park staff is not allowed to work on campaigns, but in the months beforehand, they can do research on the park needs. They can give presentations to elected officials and to the public, and they can prepare reports that can later help shape a campaign message. And the ballot measure needs to be worded to allay public concerns. For example, guaranteeing that the amount of funding goes to the various park improvements and setting limits on the portion that could be used for other purposes. Also, there was public oversight of these funds, either by a commission or a citizen task force. I want to see this park funding measure be successful. It's been decades since the public has been asked to help come to the aid of our parks. But please, word the measure so that we know that the park funds will be used for the parks, rather than being scattered around elsewhere. Assure us that this money will be added to the park funding, rather than simply replacing some existing funding that can be shifted elsewhere, and require some public oversight of the funds. Please take the time to do it right. Don't rush into this thing, because it'll be harder to try to come back later if you fail. So, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jean Dresden, and I am a park advocate. Good to see you all. Welcome back. The 2 rounds of polling clearly show that there is a lot of support, a majority support among our respondents for our parks. They care about our parks, and they were not deterred strongly by a modest parcel tax. In the most recent one, the overall number was 59% responded positively, despite the effort to dissuade them by telling them about all the other bond measures. Now, these results would be easy to work with in a campaign and to leverage if there had been time. This is a successful campaign is built over time by educating the population, by having a clear spending plan, by doing message development, and then finally boots on the ground. And the spending plan that was considered for this was not going to be available till September. With ballots dropping in October, there's no way this measure could go forward. Our voters know, the results show, that our San Jose parks need help and that the current resources are not enough to maintain aging infrastructure and mitigate the impacts of the homeless that are in our parks. We need council champions to step up and advocate for parks, to shepherd a ballot measure through the legislative barriers both procedural and political, to make a parks ballot measure a council priority and provide clarity about a spending plan, include it into that plan, into the municipal code, and establish an oversight process. Who among you will step up and be park champions on council?
Thank you.
Thank you. Did we have any other public comment? I see.
Bill on tree removal, which I don't think is this topic. And then,
Is Sir Pierluigi coming down?
hey,
All right.
Good afternoon, Council, City Manager, Council members, Mayor. So I'd ask you for your support to put something on the ballot for parks. You all, or almost everyone that runs for City Council, is a park advocate. And you all deal with, you and your staff, your constituents, dealing with shortcomings in the park, whether it be for fun or safety. And so the idea is that we should focus attacks on the physical world of the park, right? The maintenance, adequate water budget, capital improvements that our residents need to enjoy the parks. Much like you did with the road tax, people were able to physically see the benefit. Even people that didn't care for taxes were like ecstatic because their road was paved. 2026 may not be better. There still could be a worse economy. You will have other ballot measures from other government entities competing for the goodwill of San Jose taxpayers willing to pay for additional taxes. I can assure you there will be no organized opposition to this tax in this year. In a future year, I can't guarantee that, but there will be none. You all have the star power to affect the residents in a way that school boards, college boards, and other government entities do not. However, those government entities are taxing the same San Jose residents 10 times the amount. San Jose should get its fair share to provide adequate services to parks, and I'd ask you to consider that as you deliberate. But this is your opportunity with a presidential election. You're not going to have this opportunity in 2026. Thank you.
back to council.
Great, thank you. All right, coming back to the council. I was also just informed, I knew there was some wrinkle, for special meetings we do not do open forum. So for those of you who are here to reach the council on a different topic, I'm going to point you initially to Stephen No on my team. Stephen, if you could just make sure we deal with any constituent inquiries that we won't be taking up later. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to turn to my colleagues. I see we have a lot of folks who want to weigh in, so we'll kick off with Councilor Batra.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the staff for those polling results and doing very methodical 3 different polls and giving us the information whether there is a support for this thing or not. And thanks for your recommendation. I'm just going to summarize some of the things which I have heard from your polling and also from my own talking with the district members of different types. And my summary is, yes, most people agree that the parks are an essential resource. Communities' health, both physical and mental, depends on having good parks in our city. And fortunately, we do have enough. But the parks do require maintenance. And many of our parks do not have the level of maintenance which it should. So those parts are agreeable. Then the question is, okay, so what do we need to do to make these parks better or more maintained or better maintained? Now, some of the members believe that before we throw any more resources on it, they need to have a clear indication that the current resources are being efficiently utilized. So one benefit of doing this deferment will be an opportunity for us to be able to demonstrate to those people that the money is being utilized more efficiently or fully efficiently as it can be. Second part is that they're not clear on that when we say better maintenance, what would really be better maintenance? Would it be the turf? Would it be the bathrooms? Would it be the playgrounds? So need to be clear on what we will be really improving and by what, so the outcomes are very clear from the money which is spent. But now we talk about the current economic environment. The many residents in our district definitely feel overtaxed. They are feeling that the money is becoming tight, or they're looking at a future which is not as rosy as it might have looked a little while ago, with the number of layoffs being announced, and they do not feel that any additional tax they could absorb at this point in time or would be worthwhile in having that. Also, we haven't been able to develop this ballot measure to the extent, like Jean Dresden just talked about, to a proper explanation where the residents would understand what they are getting for this purpose. So considering those things, that there is no appetite for additional tax being absorbed by our people due to the economic circumstances. Also, those big bonds measures which are there, if approved, they are going to be taxing our people. And again, that doesn't sound very good at the moment. So considering those items, I agree that the staff recommendation is a very wise recommendation to defer this consideration of the parcel tax. And in the meantime, look at the number one, demonstrating the efficiency of the money being used. Number, look at the additional sources which may be available to us to be able to do this thing, and not pursue the parcel tax at this time when it's likely to fail anyways because of the polling which it has indicated. So considering all those, I suggest that we do accept the recommendation of the staff to defer this thing to 2026 and come back and reconsider things. And in the meantime, we may do the things which may obviate the need of having such a parcel tax because of the other things which we'll be able to do in the time which we buy and not doing this work. So I make the motion to accept the staff recommendation of deferring this parcel tax measure to 2026. Okay.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Let's go to Councilmember Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, I just want to start by sharing a sincere thank you for our staff, especially calling out Peter Hamilton, Sarah Sarate, and everyone really who sacrificed time your summer to take on this very important body of work. Your effort does not go unnoticed. Regardless of today's outcome, I'm incredibly grateful for the thoughtfulness and expediency in which you all took this on over the last month. In March of this year, our Brown Act gave direction to explore additional funding mechanisms for operation and maintenance to improve our neighborhood parks, spurring the work that's before us today. And prior to this, I had been having pressing conversations about a parks parcel tax or a bond measure, taking inspiration from the previous bond measure in 2000. My motivation has always been simple: improve the quality of our parks for residents that need it the most. In underfunded park districts like mine in Eastside San Jose, the quality of the park is the difference between it being a gang hotspot or it being used by families and young children. And that being said, I can see the writing on the wall and recognize that today or this election cycle may not be the best time to put this on the ballot. But I am eagerly looking forward to future polls on this topic, and I'm hopefully looking forward to 2026. And I hope that will be a successful year for parks and working families here in the city of San Jose. And because we need to, as a city, ensure that all communities have access to quality parks here in the city of San Jose. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Jimenez?
Yeah, thank you. Just to echo the expression of appreciation for all the work that you all have done. I just have two questions. One is related to the polling that was done, I think was it June or March? And then it was done again. So there was a change in the polling firm, and I was curious as to why that occurred.
I'm happy to answer that. That was ultimately a decision I made. As noted when we reported this on June, we used one of the polling firms that we have access to that I think does good survey methodology around the focus areas and like what the demographics of our general population is. Actual election polling is very different kind of beast, and there were a lot of inconsistencies, as I mentioned in that poll, that were surprising, and the poll actually conflicted. So after kind of exploring the universe and the capacity of that firm, I wanted to use FM3, the firm that we've used probably since 2012, that just had much more consistency with us on electoral and especially bond measures. Go back to that firm to get a picture, a more accurate picture to illustrate for you guys.
Okay. Is there any reason why they weren't? And these are just sincere questions because I noticed the difference, obviously, in the results as well as the questions that were asked and things of that nature. And so, is there any reason that we didn't consider using them the first time around as opposed to using someone else and then going?
I think it was honestly a procurement issue, so we had gone with them. I will say, since 2012, though, this is a very regular exercise for us. We have never not pulled through July to make a decision the first week of August. I know Dave from FM3, it probably drives him crazy because every single one of his clients actually does that, the other cities that they work with. So it's not at all irregular for us to go back out, but I did want, after meeting with the original firm, to go back to FM3. So we made that decision.
Okay, all right, thank you. Another question I have is, I guess maybe this will be to Peter Hamilton. I know he brought up a slide in which it showed sort of the pessimism rise or fall. And I was curious, Peter, because I know you do a lot of this research, and you probably have the answer to this, but did you, in looking at some of that data, get a sort of glimpse into how successful ballot measures are when there is a certain level of pessimism among the population and such? I mean, I don't know if there was any sort of interesting sort of takeaways from any of the data that you looked at that would highlight any of that.
Thank you, Councilmember. That is a very good question. Unfortunately, I don't think we can recall any of the research that we've looked at that really looks at that correlation.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We could certainly take a look and see if there's anything, but we haven't. That wasn't in what we've seen so far.
Okay, I think what we could do to maybe better answer your question, I would say the public being pessimistic can revolve around a bunch of different things. When people are concerned about the economy, the appetite to spend more goes down severely. But Dave, I don't know if you poll throughout the entire state. You have a much better view of this than we might have. But how, downward economy and being nervous about where the country, state, and local is going, how that impacts. Can you answer that?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council, members of the public. I'm Dave Metz, president of FM3 Research. As Mr. Wilcox noted, we've been polling for the city since actually 2000, assessing ballot measures in the city of San Jose. And we work for dozens of communities across the state doing similar kinds of assessments. It is absolutely true that in this year's polling, we are seeing a combination of concerns about the cost of living and, frankly, more widespread cynicism about government at all levels, local, state, and federal, contributing to lower levels of support for potential tax and bond measures. I would say that in general, we're seeing measures poll between 5 and 10 points lower right now than is typical in most of the communities where we do this kind of polling on a regular basis. And it's for the same reasons that you see reflected in both of the polls that you have before you. It's just a very tough climate that presents some headwinds for any type of revenue measure, no matter how much it aligns with strong public values, like the ones we see here for parks in San Jose.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'd be curious, just since we know that the the outlook for the country, the economy, how people are feeling generally. I think what you express is what I hear, what you read in the news, what you certainly see in the political sort of dynamics of this country. Is there any reason, given some of that, why we wouldn't have included in some of the language in the polling related to oversight, as has been sort of mentioned? And I know we've used similar language in other ballot measures, like oversight of the money and things, public oversight of the money, I should say, or anything like that. Is it common to include that in the ballot language or the questions that we're asking when we're trying to get a gauge as to where people are as it relates to support?
It is. I will say that those kinds of messages are typically reasons for voters not to vote no more than they are reasons for them to vote yes. What they can do is prevent your support from eroding more than they can move it up. We did include some of that. The ballot language we tested ended by saying there would be full public disclosure of all spending. Unfortunately, with the 75-word limit and the things that are legally required to be included, it was hard to be much more expansive about accountability provisions. I certainly do agree that in communicating about such measures, it's important to emphasize those things. But given what we're seeing, I'm skeptical that more focus there would have yielded meaningfully different results, especially in the initial ballot, which is the key metric we look at.
Okay. And then the other question I had is, when you've worked with other jurisdictions, have you seen examples of jurisdictions knowing that they, say, are looking a few years out to put forward a ballot measure, that they've been very purposeful about doing some groundwork to present us with the best opportunities moving forward when in fact we are interested in moving those forward? Do cities typically do that?
Absolutely. I think looking at the kinds of results you see here, where the public clearly places an enormous value on parks and open space and recreational activities, it's an essential part of what makes this a good place to live. But we know we're facing what are likely significant but temporary economic headwinds. Using planning now to build towards a 2026 election, when those values will still be present, the economic headwinds may be less, and because it's not a presidential year, there are unlikely to be as many state and regional finance measures ahead of you on the ballot that may also dampen voter support, which is one of the things we tested for in this poll. The more time that you have to sort of build that public awareness and understanding of why the city may place something on the ballot, the better off you can be. I think one of the public commenters before was recognizing the importance of that kind of sort of steady stakeholder engagement as a precedent to having a measure on the ballot.
Okay, all right. And then with that, I'll ask this question because I think maybe this is where you might go, because I'm curious about if we are looking out to 2026, what do we as a city, as a Parks Department, think that we can do along with the advocates, all the supporters within the city of Parks, to start laying the foundation to make sure that we're successful as it moves forward into that space? Because supremely needed. I think it's $600 million deferred maintenance, if not more. I think it's the main interface, parks are the main interface oftentimes between the residents and the city. And so oftentimes the way the parks look is really the takeaway they get from the city, and whether we're doing a good job or not as elected officials, as a mayor, as staff. And so knowing all that, what are we doing? What does it look like looking towards 2026? What do we think we're going to be doing to sort of lay a groundwork for success?
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember. Angel Rios, Deputy City Manager. Just adding to what Dave mentioned, I think we have a real good example, a recent example in Los Angeles, right? 2016, Measure A, they first went out to the voters, failed miserably. Went back, kind of regrouped, and they set up a powerful campaign led by political leadership with very close coordination with park stakeholders and community stakeholders, and they really fashioned a message around this is the value of parks in a very in an environment that was also very leery, coming off recession times and all that, of more taxes, and it just really showed the power of a campaign, right, and the messaging and the inherent message points around accountability and results and performance measurements and those kinds of things. That measure passed by a margin of 76%, it was approved in perpetuity, so they actually have to go back to the voters to eliminate it. Generates approximately $96 million a year for LA parks. They have two funds. They have a capital fund and they have a park maintenance fund. So I think there's a lot that we could learn there. So looking at on the horizon here up until 2026, I think it'll be important for we as a city to kind of really take a closer look and do some additional work around just fine-tuning our data, our case, and that kind of a thing. Convene additional stakeholders. We already have a good number of park stakeholders. You heard some of them today. There's many more out there as well. And then really kind of lay the foundation for a strong campaign. In my opinion, the best campaigns are usually led with a political leader kind of driving it in close coordination with good data provided by an operational department. So I would say that between now and 2026, that really should be the order of business.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. That's all my questions. I'll be supporting the memo or the motion. But thank you for all the work. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Councilor Jimenez. I appreciate it. That was a great line of questioning. Just before I turn to Councilor Torres, Dave, since we have the privilege of having you here, good to see you. Thank you for taking the time to be here in person. Just to add one more element when we look at this cycle, since I know we will all be asked by park advocates in our districts and our community, how much movement do you typically see, just based on, just to get your independent assessment of the results? How would you suggest we help the public understand, those who are most committed to our parks, why this might not be the moment? I mean, I've been through enough of these to know that these numbers are fairly conclusive, that it would be an uphill battle, but I'm just hoping you could add a little bit of color on how to think about this data in light of this cycle.
Yeah. I would just say that as a general principle, for measures that require 2/3 voter support, when they start below that threshold, it's really, really hard to get them over it. And both of your polls showed the beginning number to be less than that 2/3 number. It also requires a lot of resources, both on the public side to plan and run the election, and from park supporters who put in blood, sweat, tears, and money to get these kinds of things passed. And it's hard to do that twice. And attempting to do it and then falling short rarely is something that galvanizes people to go through the exercise again. So knowing that there's that kind of passion and support out there, knowing how close we are, I mean, it's entirely feasible that in a year that doesn't have some of these headwinds, the poll numbers are 5-6 points higher, and then you're right there where you need to be. So I would frame this not as not moving forward today, but just shifting the target date for when you'll take action, and asking those community members to continue working over that period of time with a different timetable toward the same goal.
Yeah, great. Not to mention the fact that that whole mobilization would have to happen in 90 days with people focused on a lot of other races and measures, which is why I think Councilor Jimenez's last question was so on point, and I think Angel's example of what they did in LA is a case study worth looking more closely at. Okay, thank you. Councilor Torres.
Good afternoon, and welcome back, everyone. Oh wait, I think they worked. Well, we took a small little vacation. Again, thank you so much. I know this is extremely important. And I think from the comments that Angel just had, I think we figured out who the campaign manager for 2026 is going to be. So it's gonna be Angel Rios for sure. But no, and all jokes aside, I grew up in a neighborhood that obviously didn't have any parks. I didn't have any neighborhood parks. I know many of you know my story. You know the story of many youth in the Washington neighborhood who grew up without a local neighborhood park. And if it wasn't for Strong Neighborhoods, the Strong Neighborhoods Initiative, which is redevelopment monies, or the Measure P bond back in 2000, right? My area where I currently live would probably still be without a park. And so, every child, every family, every resident, every senior deserves a beautiful, clean, safe park in our city. And I know that there are council districts with underfunded parks, and we all know which ones they are. We come to these meetings, right? And they're mostly in District 3, 5, 7, and parts of 8, obviously. So, you know, for me, we really need to make sure that this measure is on the 2026 ballot. We can't continue to kick the can down the road. I know that we're going to continue to have other financial measures on the ballot, whether it is a school board one, or whether it's a college board one, whether it's a VTA one, whether it's a state proposition. We're always going to have a measure on the ballot. And so I hope to still be on the council in 2026, and so that's why it's well, I'll be running for re-election actually. But however, in 2026, while I'm running for re-election, I really want to make sure that we have a measure for our parks, because it's really needed. And you know, I'm just going to throw out in the 24 years that I voted in 2000 in our city, we passed BART. We had Measure O for our libraries, Measure P for our parks, obviously, right? In 2026. We had another VTA financial measure, right, with Measure B, right, the half-cent sale tax. We had the housing bond for the county, right, Measure A. So if we do this right, with multiple measures on the ballot, we can win, and I know that we can. And so I will be supporting the motion, you know, grudgingly, but. I think if we do this right in 2026, we can win. But before I do yield the rest of my time, I do actually have 2 questions, and I'm going to piggyback of the comments that Angel had. So Angel, are we creating a working group, or are we working closely with our Parks Commission to talk about this measure in 2026?
Yeah, I'll defer that to Neil, but just you know, based on today's action, that would be one of the next steps that we would do. Is we would basically, following up on the previous council direction that we received, is really solidify a game plan, a strategy for kind of preparing for next steps, vetting that out internally here, perhaps reporting that out through NSC. I know this coming February, the annual park maintenance report gets presented to NSC. I think there's a good opportunity for us to fold some of that information into it. I don't think by February we'll have the whole thing cooked, but I think we could begin to kind of lean forward in that direction. And then also use the next few months to more formally convene our key stakeholders and partners, which are going to be very key in advancing in creating and advancing the message. So that would be one of the next steps. We would still need to kind of go back and really solidify the next step strategy, but so yes.
Yeah, if I can jump in as well, and I do just want to thank Angel and Jean, both of them, and which I've been involved a bit. I think for the last 10 years I've been trying this, and so it started and stopped. So probably saw Jean and I smirking at each other a little bit. We've given each other that speech quite a bit, and I do want to say, you know, while we're all a little bit upset that the numbers weren't where they needed to be today, those numbers are actually better than they've been since 2015 in areas where the economy was pretty good. So I do think the actual care about what our community feels is actually much stronger. We're actually in a better position today than I think we have been on this. I do think the coordination that staff does over the next few months is going to be crucial. We obviously can't spend any money, city money, on a campaign. And this process always started too late because, as Jean mentioned, that spending plan and the work of what's unmet, what the stakeholders and everyone wants, and then what's going to be, you know, voter appetite, where that overlays becomes a spending plan. And that's where Angel and Parks need to spend a lot of time over the next several months. And we need to be able to come back much sooner to all of you, because it's the 11 of you outside of the building that's going to take that. And as Dave mentioned, what's the grassroots campaign? Where's the mobilization? And what is the messaging around that? And so that will be something that everyone in this room does together. But we will absolutely need to spend time with the stakeholders and staff on the unmet needs and what that spending plan is, because every time we've been successful at the ballot, over the last 10 years, which we have been quite a bit, it's been that formula. We've been able to come to you early, and then you guys have been able to do what you guys need to do with community stakeholders as well.
Great, thank you. I don't, Neil, if you want to say something, I think Angel said. Or
yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with the statements I've made and the direction I feel that the conversation is going. While the department is, saddened by the results of it, we understand it, but we're ready to do this as a whole team, community, council, and city administration, the Parks Department. We feel the runway for 2026 is an appropriate time frame for us to do this. We'll have, over the next few months, continue working on the data, continue working on what is needed to help the community understand the results or what is it within our park system that will benefit them as residents. Throughout this time, I mean, there's a fine line between the official campaign and the information that a department can provide to the community about the benefits and the challenges of having more funds into the Parks Department, and we're definitely 100% committed in providing that to the community.
Great, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Councilor. Vice Mayor?
Thank you. And I too would like to thank you for all your work on this. Parks are critically important. They really help with a good quality of life, and I agree with my fellow council members that yes, in fact, it is something that people deserve to have a clean, safe parks. I'm a little bit concerned about just even looking at the results, where there are many who don't believe that there's a great need to assist the parks, or the percentage was, to me, surprisingly lower than I had anticipated, because I know people love their parks. I also think that we need to have some kind of strategy or plan on how to prepare for gaining people's support. I will tell you that in my District 1 area, we're the ones with the least number of parks, and then the parks that we have, I have huge problems in some of the areas. We opened up a brand new park, and it is just gang tagged all over the place. And I have a local neighborhood association that has adopted it. They go every Monday to clean, and it's a huge problem. Because I think that it's very easy to say, oh yeah, we need money for operations and maintenance. I tell you, I meet with operations and maintenance on a monthly basis. They're working their tails off. They're trying to keep them clean, and it's horrible to go to certain parks, and on Monday morning, the garbage cans are just overflowing, everything is filthy, and I want to know, where are the park rangers? Maybe we need not just maintenance and operations, but we need some kind of help with some of the activities that take place in the parks. Because I tell you, the residents that keep complaining to me, they're not going to vote for anything. They kind of go back to the cynicism of government, that they keep sending pictures, they keep sending different things, and they don't see any action. And we cannot tell them, oh, we're under-resourced because we can't hire park rangers. That is not a way of gaining support, because what they're seeing is that, hey, if you want me to give you more money, then what's the plan? What are you going to do? And I think that this how to prepare for support is going to be key, because people are not going to vote for it. There is fatigue in the community, and I think that the current staff is doing a lot already. I mean, I see them. I go out there and help with the cleanups and everything like that. I'm trying to follow our mayor, who does all these cleanups. I can't keep up, but at the same time, I think we need a plan as to how to get the advocates and the community engaged in a way that they know that it's their park, that it's safe, that it's clean, that we're going to do something about it, and that we're going to address these issues together. And yes, we need more funding to be able to do more, But at the same time, you need a plan for that, a strategy.
Vice Mayor, you raise a very important point. And if you take a look at, without getting into the weeds in terms of the back data, when you take a look at the results where we got the most support, it's in neighborhoods that actually had newer and better parks. Because you could draw a correlation between, if this is what I get, then yeah, I would like to invest more. Conversely, in neighborhoods where you have older and parks that are in greater disrepair, you're going to have least support. So I would also say, based on your comments, that one of the other next steps that we should also incorporate, and we've been talking about this internally with Lee and Jennifer and John and the department and all, is we also need to take some in transitional steps to really strengthen and repair our older, more dilapidated parks, if we're going to get to that point. Because you're absolutely right. Because right now our current park financing model is in disrepair, right? It's really an unequal distribution of resources in terms of the way we maintain parks. And of course, it's easier to maintain a newer park than it is an older park, right? So we're also going to grapple with that. We have noted that as also one of our next steps, to take a look at what can we do in the short term to enhance those parks that just really can't wait for 2026 and another initiative, right? So we also need to do some more work. So I just want to kind of let you know that we're hearing that loud and clear, because we are going to have to factor that. This isn't just about convincing people to spend more. This is about also delivering more in the short term while we message that long-term vision around, hey, we could have the best parks in San Jose, but it is going to cost money.
Yeah, I thank you for that. I also think that, bringing in additional community members to let them know that, they're part of the solution too. I mean, I think it's great to have advocates, but it isn't just the advocates. If you lived in that neighborhood, we want you to be involved, right? We want you to participate in making that park beautiful as well. We want you to be part of a cleanup, part of a tree planting. And, if the community is also invested in the park, I think that it brings more support. But I also think that we need to have those opportunities for people. I tell you, I love all of the Viva Park activities and all of that, but it's like the city putting out into the community. I think that we have to find ways of having the community come engage in what's being done in order for them to see the value of what's in their area already. Because if there are some who believe, oh no, it's the city's responsibility to do all of this, it's a problem. It's a problem. I think that if we can somehow be able to, sort of like get people together, I think that you'd get better support to reach the thresholds that you need. So I'm just saying this in terms of creating a plan, be strategic, be intentional with what you're going to do to get to your threshold that you need to pass something. So, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Appreciate those comments. We have a few more hands here. Let's go to Councilor Candelas.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank Angel, Sarah, and Peter for your insights on the polling results and your work on this over the summer. And it's, I think it's kind of serendipitous that today is National Night Out, and we're talking about parks. So I know when I go out into my district today, I'm going to take a long, hard look at the lawn, or what's supposed to be the lawn. It's probably going to be dry. There's probably going to be gopher holes, and I know there's going to be patches in the field and in the playground as a reminder of today's conversation, because I know we all hear from our residents on the need to do better with our limited dollars. I know Avi and Neil hear from me all the time. Specifically to Lake Cunningham. So, Angel, to your point on looking at what we're going to do in the short term because we can't wait to 2026, I hope Lake Cunningham's on that list. But, there's a reality that we have to see with regards to the polling. And FM3, thank you for your work on a poll. And while I know the reality for most of us is disappointing, it's still a reality. And it also just points to the amount of work that still needs to happen going into 2026, and the work to lay the groundwork. In previous experiences, I know there is a robust public education campaign that foreshadows the decision that we're supposed to be having today. And there was no speakers bureaus, there was no community forums, there's no all these things that needed to happen in order for us to have this conversation for what's supposed to be going to the voters. And so now I challenge staff, come 2026, we should have laid out a groundwork in a campaign, not a campaign per se, but an education campaign for our community. So we can go out afterwards outside of City Hall, to Acting City Manager Leland Wilcox's point, and campaign for it. But the goal is to programmatically come up with something that the residents could vote for, but also have some accountability for how the dollars are going to be used judiciously and efficiently. We talk about public disclosure in the poll. What is that? We need citizen oversight. We need annual audits. Maybe a senior exemption for those of us, those in our community that are on fixed income. Those are all things that will come of that public education campaign as we hear from our residents. And so I hope that in February, some of these things are incorporated in that feedback to NSC, and we can hopefully move the needle on trying to convince our community that this is important, because while anecdotally, I hear it all the time saying, hey, our parks are in disrepair. There's the water feature at Fowler Park that hasn't worked since 2015 because we shut it down in the first drought, and now we haven't been able to use it. And just because it's in Fowler Creek Park doesn't mean my residents from Brigadoon or Meadow Fair don't go to it. And so a lot of people are depending on us to fix the issue, and I look forward to fixing that issue with staff. Thank you.
Great, thanks for those comments. Councilor Cohen?
Thank you. Let me just say these conversations are very frustrating because we are the stewards of our public spaces and want to make sure we do have all the resources we need to keep them in as great shape as possible and usable and in the best possible condition for our residents. I want to just comment, of course, there's always in these conversations, and I sat on NSC for 2 years where we had these conversations over and over again about the poor shape of parks across the city and the park condition index and all the things that we do to measure our park condition. I want to take a moment to thank our park maintenance staff for what they do under difficult conditions, because we have limited resources, a very large inventory of parks, and we operate under conditions that many jurisdictions don't have to. We do operate in a drought environment. We're kind of building parks in a desert and expecting green grass to stay there. And our residents get upset when it isn't that way, but we have to recognize this isn't easy work. Those of us who represent the east side have gophers near the east foothills that basically destroy every open space, including all the school fields, and this is not something where a little extra money is going to necessarily solve the problem. So we have to thank our staff for what they do under the conditions that we have in our city. I do want to comment about just first about parcel tax. As somebody who has chaired a couple of parcel tax measures in the past, I know that you need to have polling that is above the threshold when you start in order to make sure that you get it across the finish line. So it's clear that we are not in that condition now, and so the debate about whether to put it on the ballot this year, I think, is kind of done for now, unfortunately, but it's important for us to have gone through this conversation. I wish we had a more democratic system, because allowing 1/3 of the voters to be able to overturn the will of the majority of people in our city who want to support our parks frustrates me to no end. We have to operate under the system we have, but the system we have is not democracy, in my opinion, but I just wanted to throw that out there. I want to ask a question about the motion itself. I heard the phrasing of your motion was to accept staff recommendation to defer the ballot measure to 2026. What I didn't hear was the inclusion of some of the rest of the items in the memo, and I wanted to be explicit about what is the motion on the floor and understand all the pieces of it. So we get clarity on the actual motion that's on the floor.
I believe it was simply to accept the staff recommendation.
Just to accept the staff recommendation. Well,
We need your mic on.
Yeah, he didn't say
Okay,
that.
we'll need to change the motion. The motion was stated as accepting the staff recommendation.
Okay, so, correction, the motion is to accept the memo, which includes accepting the staff recommendation of deferring it with the items mentioned there to provide the things which people are asking for, demonstrated the cost, show between now and 2026, demonstrate that we are using our money properly, and look at alternative resources, which are, some of it is already mentioned there.
Okay, so that's a different motion than what I heard, so I
Yeah,
just
that
wanna make sure.
actually wasn't the motion, so I just want to clarify, Nora, would that now someone need to offer that as a substitute, or can the maker of the motion make an amendment to it? He can modify.
He can
He can
modify.
If the
seconder
if the seconder
accepts.
agrees.
Yes.
Okay,
If-
so I think we
if
have
he wants to
clarity.
modify.
And does the seconder, was that your understanding of the motion? Or do you accept that as the motion?
Batra want to rephrase.
Yeah, so we will go with the original, what people heard, accept the staff recommendation, and there's no additional items, okay?
Okay, so we're just so the motion on the floor is just to accept the staff recommendation?
Yes, to defer.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure I understood, and that is the seconder's understanding?
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful.
So simply defer the item. Okay. I have a question about the date of deferral. We kind of say in both staff recommendation and the motion to defer until 2026. I did hear a great suggestion from Jean in a letter to our council about considering other options, including odd year elections, special election. Should we be specific now about deferring to 2026, or should the motion be not to place on the ballot this year and come back in the future for potential ballot measures so that we have more flexibility?
The way I read that is simply that as part of the conversation that's already been directed, which I'll go over in a second, for 2026, that this is included and part of the analysis. You may wish to do something later. Judging by the work on how fast we move, you may want to do something earlier. But as a reminder from June, which seems like a long time ago, the council did, the mayor included in his budget message, the council supported MBA 10, manager's budget addendum 10, which was new revenue. So we'll be looking at a host of new revenue measures. If we're successful with the legislature too, possibly something around sales tax that the council may want to consider given the needs, across the organization. I do think what we're doing with parks will be much more purposeful and deliberate with the stakeholders and the community over the next few months, given the numbers are good, not great, that we need to explore. So I think we have plenty of flexibility, Council.
And the feelings of the electorate may be quite different 6 months from now as it is today, and so we ought to be completely open to when the right timing is, given the need that we have.
Is that a friendly amendment to drop the specified time?
If it's necessary, if that's not understood, but if you feel like it's understood that I would prefer to drop the specificity if that's acceptable.
Councilor Batra, are you okay with just dropping any specific time to which we're deferring? I think the idea is council and staff is just described as actively continuing to assess. So, yeah. Doesn't have to be 2026
Yes, I'm
specifically.
fine with that. Yeah.
Great. Okay, with seconder? Wonderful.
Thank you.
Great. Anything else, Councilman?
No, that's it. I just want to again, thank staff for this, and also, obviously, we ought to continue to, understand the needs of our parks and what resources are out there, what our deferred maintenance, we have regular reports on this, but what our deferred maintenance needs are as a city so that we can inform the community about that as we get concerns about our local parks. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Councilor. Appreciate you clarifying a few things there. Councilor Foley?
Councilman was next, but I'll go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just going in order on my list.
It's okay.
Here.
No worries.
Sorry, Councilor. We will get to you in just a moment.
Okay. First, thank you for your presentation. You're not responsible for the results, but the results are disappointing, although not surprising given the amount of bond measures that may be coming that will be on our ballot. We just learned that San Jose Unified is approved, placing a huge bond measure on people who live within the San Jose Unified District. That is a bond, so it has a lower threshold, but it's a huge impact to the property taxpayer. So that's just one. That's one local. There's lots of them, and lots of school districts are looking at that. By rejecting moving forward with a ballot measure does not in any way, shape, or form mean that we do not support our parks. I think everyone up here has commented how important our parks are. We recognize the need and the use and demand and the actual cost of deferred maintenance, or the high level of deferred maintenance that we have. So we need to come up with some sort of funding mechanism. But it's clear that we need to sell this a little bit better. We need to find out from our community what they need in our parks and that we're not giving them, and work with them to find out how to satisfy this requirement of using our parks and improving our parks. To Councilmember Candelas's point, this is National Night Out, and many of us will be going to our parks, and many of us will be careful not to trip over the roots that are pulled up in the grass, or the gopher holes that are occurring, because the fields are not in great condition, and our kids, I get concerned about them twisting their ankles on our fields, but they're hugely expensive to tear out a field and replace it. So we clearly don't have the funds now, but we have the demand, the desire. So we just need to have to figure out how we can advocate, how we can create a plan, how we can survey our community so that we will be successful, and so that we raise the percentage of success before we go to the ballot. Because as the mayor mentioned, we need to be at the number now, 66.6% or close, not way below it, because moving it up is harder. It will come down as we get closer to the ballot or to Election Day. So I appreciate all of the conversations. I would recommend that next time we poll, we do include the senior exemption as a notification tool, because some of the people voting against it may be seniors on fixed income who own their house, and their only expense may be their property taxes, but based on their Social Security income, it may be difficult for them to afford to pay the parcel tax or the bond, whichever it is. It either affects their property taxes. So letting them know that there is a senior exemption, I think, is really important in moving that population potentially upwards to yes. With that, and one more clarification, I'm a little confused. So we are only voting on item 1, which is to defer the ballot measure.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. With that, I'm concluded my comments. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Appreciate those comments. And last but certainly not least, Councilor Dewan. Sorry for the delay.
Thank you very much, Mayor. First of all, I just want to say thank you, staff. I know you put a tremendous amount of work into this, and thank you for being honest and straightforward that the recommendation, to go towards 2026. With the economy the way it is, with many families who are trying to make ends meet, even get food on the table, I don't believe it's the right time, but 2026 might be. And when we do that in 2026, and I know you will come with a very clear plan of spending, also the implementation, how the outcome to involve many of the stakeholders. And I believe that if we do it right, then we can get the measure passed. But if we kind of half-ass it right now and competing with our other bond measure, we're going to fail. And if I'm correct, if we were to put it on the ballot right now, it would cost us about $2.5 million, right? And I heard it earlier that PRNS can be more efficient and also finding funding from general fund. And I think we can use that $2.5 million to supplement PRNS to help out to upkeep some of the park. Is that true? Can we use that $2.5 million for spending on something that we're going to fail versus using that $2.5 million in supplement?
Hello, Councilmember. Thank you for the question. Jim Shannon, City's Budget Director. So the funding for elections and ballot measures is in a separate pot of funding called the Elections and Ballot Measures Citywide Expenses Appropriation. So that would require council voting to sort of move that funding into a different spot. I will say that any savings that are sort of showing up now are sort of really, really too early to do anything that I would want to recommend to the council. We have a long way to go in the fiscal year, so I would want to see us sort of wait to take any other reallocation as part of the proposed budget process.
Thank you. Now, I know that the polling is in June, and then as we get closer to November, as we all know, the market has gone down, not only right here in the United States, but many other countries as well is going to trickle down and affect us. I'm not predicting the futures. I just want to make sure we have prepare for the outcome that possibly could go wrong, right? And I think it's important that, again, we come back with a very clear planning, clear spending, and a clear outcome, so that way our resident will see the result. But at the same time, at this point, we can be more efficient with what we do and show that we need that resource, even at our best, being efficient, and cut spending to make our park better the way it is now. Then I believe the constituent will support us on it. And again, I thank you so much, staff, for putting the program together and continue to do a great job out there taking care of our constituent and our parks.
Great. Thanks, Councilmember. I think that's a great note to end on. I'll echo everyone's gratitude to staff for the work on our parks, as well as all the research and the presentation today. Thank you again, Dave, for doing the poll and taking the time to be with us. I think we are ready to vote. Tony, what do we vote?
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, great. And that is going to conclude our special meeting. So we are adjourned. Thank you all.